Hello, it's Danny Allen. I'm back with you again at Secure DevCon. Super excited to be with you here. Now, the coolest and hottest thing right now is very much around artificial intelligence. And so today I am very excited to be joined by Ryan J. Salva from Google to talk about secure development and AI and all things related to that. Ryan, maybe you want to introduce yourself for the audience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome, friends. Hi. Yeah. As Danny said, my name is Ryan J. Salva. I'm Senior Director of Product over at Google, where I look after AI assistive developer tools. I'm actually a new addition to Google. I just joined a couple of months ago. I spent the last 4 years at GitHub, where as VP of Product, looking after the Copilot product. And before that, about a decade at Microsoft, where I did a bunch of different stuff. But at least my most recent gig was looking after Azure DevOps, Microsoft's other DevOps tool, as well as Microsoft's internal engineering systems. Before that, another decade at various century startups, some of them other people, some of them my own. But really, my career, what's kept me up late at night, got me up early every morning, is helping other people create things with software. I really kind of dedicated my professional work to other people's creativity through software. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
That's awesome, Ryan. And it's definitely true. We're passionate about software. Software is eating the world. But actually, these days, AI is eating the software that is eating the world. And so it's an
I was gonna
exciting
say
time to
it's
be in the
past tense.
industry.
Software is already done, ate the world. It's done. It's over.
Yeah. So I think the goal for this session, we really want to talk about how we make the development process easier for developers. I know that we're going to talk about AI, and AI is important, but would you agree that the goal here really is about improving the optimization of developers themselves?
The optimization of developers themselves, that's an interesting frame on it. I would say that the goal here is to optimize for developer creativity and
Mhm.
to optimize for the quality of the products that we're able to bring to our customers and to our users, right? Like in the end, when I really think about the role of any developer tool, whether it's AI powered or not, it's really to help the developer express themselves through code and do so, especially when they're in a team environment, in a way that is consistent across the entire team. And so, when I'm building developer tools, and for the last several years, when I've been building AI assistive tools, it's really been with an eye towards, how do we bring information to the developer at the moment when they need it? How do we help the developer wayfind within the code base and really wayfind within, often when they're trying to debug or troubleshoot a problem? How do we help them pinpoint the challenges, the problems, the little syntax idiosyncrasies that sometimes escape our human eyes, and use the tools to bring greater focus to the development process.
And clearly, you see AI as being a major part of that. Is that a fair statement?
It's certainly the newest and most transformative part of it. I think if you think about the chapters of software development over the course of the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years or so, we've had a few major inflection points. I mean, there is the advent really of the web and e-commerce and the kind of like late 90s, early aughts. There was mobile development in kind of like the 2010s, coupled with DevOps transformations. And really now we're kind of at the next stage of transformation with AI. And so, certainly, is it the most important tool that we have? No, probably a code editor and terminal are still the most important tools we have. But AI is the newest and most, the thing that's really causing us to re-examine a lot of our practices up till now.
That's fair. I code sometimes in Notepad. I try not to ultra edit, but we use all these tools in our toolbox. How do you see the AI development landscape evolving over the next few years? When I say
Yeah,
the AI development landscape, I'm really talking about the tools that are used by developers over the next few years.
yeah, fair, fair. I mean, for the last, let's call it 3.5 years or so, AI as an engineer's tool has
Hmm.
mostly been about predictive text, autocomplete, Some chat here as well, where we're kind of taking turns with the AI to maybe ask questions and maybe synthesize a larger amount, which has been fantastic. I mean, to a lot of people's eyes, my own included, it's been almost magical at moments. Um, and also, AI has really been there largely to save some keystrokes, right? It's really
Hmm.
been there to just think a little bit ahead of the developer, maybe occasionally help them wayfind and pinpoint kind of challenges in their code base or ask, hey, what's happening here? Can you explain this to me? As we look forward, what we're going to see is that AI starts to get used for a lot more of the actual creative problem solving, a lot more of the scaffolding. Maybe in just very technical terms, one way to think about it is that most AI in the last 3, 4 years has been single step inference. That is to say, you give a prompt, you get back a single response. You type a little bit, you get a single suggestion. Maybe it's one line, maybe it's 10 lines of code, but it's still a single step inference. What we're starting to move towards is a somewhat more complex data pipeline where there's multi-step inference, where developers are perhaps giving somewhat more ambiguous commands to the tool. And through a series of multiple inference steps, usually orchestrated by some kind of plan, either architected by a human or architected by the AI itself, it allows us to then go and do bigger things with
Hmm.
more automation behind it. Can I make that concrete? Because I've always feel like it's
Sure.
best with an example here, right? If for the last few years, developers have been able to put in a code comment that says, I don't know, write a function that's I don't know, a quick sort algorithm, right? It'll pretty
Yep.
easily, quickly put out a quick sort algorithm for you. Or, hey, give me a method that does, make a class that does CRUD operations off of my Stripe API. Very constrained problems, easily managed with single step inference. But let's say that maybe you've got an application that you want to upgrade from, I don't know, Java v14 to Java v21, right? And it's maybe it's not even one repo, maybe it's multiple repos. Well, when you make that upgrade from one version of the JDK to another, or one version of an SDK or library to another, you not only have syntax changes throughout the application, throughout the code base, but in some cases, you might even have small architectural changes or small kind of logical changes that you need to make in order to take advantage of the new capabilities of the SDK, the framework, and the library. That requires multi-step inference. And usually, these are the kinds of operations that would take developers at the very least days, more often than not weeks or months, depending upon the size of the application that they're working with. And as you start to leverage multi-step inference, well, now you can actually make larger batch changes. And when you've got it around the artifice of a plan that's a little bit more prescriptive about the types of changes we're making, now you can automate a lot of that with a lot more sophistication and a lot more reliability. That's what I see happening. You see this, by the way, today with Cursor SO. You see it with GitHub Workspaces, with Devin. You'll see it very, very soon enough with some of my products on the Google side of things. I think the industry is all collectively kind of chasing the same dream here.
Yeah, and that's why we appreciate the partnership so much, because I do think it comes in at the intersections of our capabilities in the technology to do this in a responsible way. How do you see organizations adopting this responsibly? Because that can be a hard thing to do. If you're rolling this out and you have 5,000 developers and you're saying, hey, use AI across your organization to deliver things more securely, what kinds
Yeah.
of safety nets or guardrails do you recommend or suggest, or ways to go about deploying that within the organization?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and like most things in engineering, it requires a somewhat nuanced answer. I'll try to distill it down to just a couple of themes, but we could geek out for a lot longer on like the big picture here. So maybe first, let me give you an observation. So it so happens that over at Google, the Dora research team actually reports up through me, and we've been working on our annual Dora report for the last few months. One of the insights that I'll preview to the audience here today that we're finding is that as organizations are adopting generative AI, usually with Dora, we kind of look at things across two dimensions. There's the speed and there's the quality of deployment, right? You get things like deployment frequency held up against things like the change failure rate. For the last decade or more, we've basically seen those two dimensions traveling in parallel. That is to say, as speed was increasing, quality was usually traveling in direct concert, right? With
Hmm.
the advent of AI, as one of the ways that we as engineers get our job done, we're actually starting right now to see a little bit of a divergence there. As speed is increasing, quality is not increasing at the same rate. We're actually seeing it start to depart a little bit. So quality is still improving for most organizations, but not necessarily at the same pace as speed. And that means that the safety nets that we have in our engineering systems become all that much more important. Now, in order to actually kind of to deploy it safely, I'm going to kind of give you like two levers to use. One is on the technology side of things, and the other is on the people and the training and the enablement side of things, right?
Hmm.
So, on the technology side of things, we have known forever and a day that testing is so important. Unit tests, UI automation, integration tests, functional tests, all that good kind of stuff. We have known that code reviews are super important, that you need to have developers putting a second and a fourth set of eyes kind of on the code to make sure that you're deploying things safely. Um, all of those practices, as our speed is increasing through AI, become even more important. And so when you're leveraging your existing safety nets, things like security scans provided through Sneak, things like your UI automation and your unit tests, if you're not getting complete coverage across those, we absolutely as an industry need to be doubling down and focusing on how are we actually, allowing our developers to exercise their creativity and their passion for speed of development while having automation happening in the background that allows us to detect and have feedback signals when things are getting a little bit rickety. On
And
the
what are the
people,
metrics? Oh,
oh,
sorry.
sorry, yeah.
Oh, people side. No, yes, let's touch on people because I think that's important for
Yeah,
clarity.
and I'll keep this brief, but what I'll say here is, I mean, I personally have worked very hard on the tools that I've built in the last several decades to make sure that the tools were intuitive,
Hmm.
easy for someone to adopt. But you know what? As much as we try as tool makers to create easy to use tools, that doesn't mean that new skills aren't necessary to adopt. And so, what I'd say is if you are putting large language models and AI in the hands of your developers, don't just expect to give them a license and an extension and just for them to be instantly successful with it. Really focus on a programmatic rollout where you're sitting your teams down, one team at a time, roughly at the director level, 30, 40-ish engineers who are all working on a code base together. Sit them down for like a 2-hour training workshop, have everyone install the extension together, have everyone go over best practices, what responsible development looks like. Turn it into a team building exercise just as much as you do a training exercise on how to use the tools. This will overall help you be a lot more successful in kind of wringing the most efficiency gains out of the tools,
Hmm.
but also the best, safety in kind of like in how your developers are using it. All right, there you
That's
go.
so important. People, process, and technology. There's a reason people come first because the culture of security is a hard thing to adopt. And that obviously starts with people. What metrics do you typically use when you're trying to determine ROI on this new model that we're using? What
Yeah.
metrics do you use to determine success or how do you evaluate that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right to kind of like pinpoint there on ROI. I find that often when I have conversations with engineering teams, engineering leaders, there's often two different conversations that we're having. It often gets bundled into metrics, but they're not all the same metrics, right? There's data everywhere. So there are a set of metrics that you have for continuous improvement. There's a set of
Hmm.
metrics that you have for programmatic adoption and rollout, and then there's a set of metrics that you have for ROI. Again, I won't be able to go through the whole kind of process, but generally speaking, when you're looking at metrics for initially the programmatic rollout, just making sure that AI is part of the equation, I'm
Hmm.
basically just looking there for engagement. Are developers actually using it? Are they active in the tool? And then I use as a checksum just to guard against regressions. Am I seeing any degradation in things like my PR merge rate velocity? Am I seeing a spike in the number of issues per developer or open vulnerabilities per developer? By the way, I'm not necessarily looking for those to improve when I'm during the rollout
Hmm.
and the adoption phase. I just don't want them to see them regress. Then, when I flip over to continuous improvement, once a critical mass of developers are using the tools, by the way, for me, critical mass, it's usually around 70% or more of the team is when you start to be able to see a bit of impact here. Now you can kick in the continuous improvement and the ROI metrics. On continuous improvement, again, number of PRs per developer, number of issues per developer, number of vulnerabilities per developer, the percentage of code being written by AI versus human. By the way,
Hmm.
just as a grounding metric here, within Google internal engineering, we're at about 26% of new code that appears in PRs is being written
Okay.
by developers. And then 51% of the total new code is written by AI. The reason that there's a difference there between 26 and 50% is that the 26% is the developers using chat and auto completion there in the IDE. Then through automation, we'll go and we'll generate a bunch of tests or documentation from the PR. And so there's a jump there from developer writing code in the editor versus programmatically generated code afterwards.
How do you know what was created by the developer versus created by the AI itself? Is that something that you just know because you've generated the code and you look at what's been modified?
Yeah, this is actually really technically interesting. So basically, what we're doing here is we know what code was accepted by the developer in the IDE, right?
Uh-huh.
Then what we can do is we can set, and as they're typing, we know what code they're typing. What we can then do is report back not the actual code itself, because
Hmm.
no organization wants to jeopardize loss of IP or anything like that. But we can report back an aggregate metric of, hey, as the developer was typing this much, and we'll do checks at multiple time points, usually
Got
like
it.
30 seconds and 5 minutes. Within Google internal engineering, we can also trace that into the repositories. We can't do that for our customers because we don't control the full data pipeline. But at least within internal engineering, we can trace it through the IDE and into the PR.
I love that. It's clearly we're using AI in meaningful ways to increase the productivity. So I love the whole partnership that we have with Google. So thank you for that. I know we
Yes.
have about a minute left here. Maybe you could just share with the audience what makes you most excited about the future. We're going forward, obviously, now in leveraging these within the organization. What gets you most excited, gets you up in the morning when we look forward?
Dude, I mean, it's all the new toys. I mean, like, we haven't had this many new toys to play with in like a decade. This is freaking awesome. No, I mean, like, I mean, yes, it's the new toys, and what gets me excited about the new toys is, I mean, I've seen numbers cast about for the last at least 5 years or so that even just locally within the United States, let alone globally, we're short by millions of developers. And if the advent of AI allows us to invite more people to participate in the creative process. Now, there's been a somewhat an artificial barrier to entry into software development that is fundamentally a language barrier. It's not a creativity barrier. It's not a logic barrier. You know, there are lots of people who want to create things on their laptops, and deliver them to their friends, their family, their customers. And they have not been able to because they couldn't speak the language of Java, or they couldn't speak the language of Rust or Clojure, or .NET. Pick your language here. And what AI is really going to enable us to do is to invite so many more people to participate in that creative process. I've got a 17-year-old niece who's been using the tools that I've built, AI assistive tools, both at GitHub and Google for the last several years. And she's been able to create some of the most amazing applications. Really, not because she had special training or coaching or tutoring in software development, but because she had the use of these tools to help her learn, to help her solve these problems and express her creativity. And I see so much more potential for really us to invite millions and millions and millions more people to participate in that process. And that gets me
It's
excited.
awesome. We're on the cusp of a change, I would say, a general change in the industry, as evidenced by everyone here at DevSecCon. Well,
Yeah.
Ryan, on behalf of everyone here at Sneak, thank you for joining us. It's been very exciting and rewarding speaking with you. And thank you. That's all I can say.
Dude, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming to the conference, and look me up, Ryan J. Salva, everywhere.